Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. We've got a debut guest today, but someone you might recognise who's been doing podcasts with likes of James Alcott and now Dan, who you may know as HLTCO, who's been on the channel previously as well. Pleased to have Flav with me. Flav, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm pleased to be on here, and we've just been having a fascinating conversation about your upbringing and why you're from Aberdeen. Yet support West Ham. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and living Stoke, just to put that in the middle of the sandwich as well. Yeah, you've had it all. You've had a rundown of my life in the last 2 minutes. But let's talk about Spurs this season, if we
Yeah.
may. What do you make of it thus far?
I mean, it's been positive, and it felt supremely positive up until, the first part of the second half against Brighton. Statistically, if you look at what Spurs have been doing, massive improvements on last year. Conceding less open sort of key chances per game. Defensive solidity seemed to be there. Spending a lot of time camped in the opponent's half, creating chances. Shots into double figures into their 20s on goal in single halves of football. So everything you want to see in attacking sense, and we're starting to feel comfortable with what's going on at Spurs. And then, as the Premier League will do to you sometimes, 20 minutes of a complete capitulation, something comparable to the middle order of an England batting side in cricket, was just so. It was catastrophic to the mood around the club, certainly from the fans' perspective, because for me, I'm a big, a big supporter of Ange Postecoglou, and I think I understand what he's trying to do and what his plan is at Spurs, and I'm kind of on board with it because I love the style of play and I love how he speaks, but even his sort of most loyal supporters after that game would have struggled to say anything positive about it in the second half. It was horrendous. But if you take away that 20 minutes, this season's been really positive.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you make of all this, let's call it Ange Ball criticism? Because it felt like as soon as that final whistle went, from a neutral, it felt like the knives were sharpened almost, and it almost felt like the media were perhaps waiting for this to happen so they could go in on him. And I was a bit surprised at the backlash towards Postecoglou personally. But like I said, I'm just an outsider looking in. But as a Tottenham fan, what did you make of the criticism that's been put at his door?
Yeah, again, as someone who backs him and wants him to be successful at Spurs, and obviously thinks that he's doing the right things the right way, it's something we've had to got used to. Since he's come, this conversation about him being naive and being, too forward thinking and unwilling to adapt in certain circumstances is one that's been sort of played out since he joined, but also has followed him around his entire career. So the way he plays, the way Spurs are playing out each week now and looking more comfortable in it, is the way he's always gone about it. And what's got him to the Premier League, and one of the biggest jobs in the Premier League, certainly in terms of opportunity, because if he can do at Tottenham what no other manager can do, and which is make us successful consistently, then his stock goes through the roof, and his reputation at Tottenham and in the Premier League should go through the roof as well, right? But the commentators and the reporters, they cannot get beyond this idea that he's naive and tactically inept, and it's unfair. He may be stubborn, and he's definitely stubborn, but he truly believes in what he's doing and the way he wants his teams to operate. And one side effect of his tactic, a negative side effect, is that we can give up big opportunities. But what happened against Brighton, and we've talked about this on our podcast, but what happened against Brighton didn't seem to be a systematic failure. It was almost like a failure of leadership in the players. It fell apart catastrophically, right? And it almost like, well, we haven't seen this before. We haven't seen it in the entirety of Postecoglou's tenureship at Tottenham. There have been other challenges and other difficulties that, in terms of conceding balls and big chances in transition. You can argue that is an issue with Postecoglou's football, but what we saw against Brighton was something else, which is why it was so alarming. It was just, we just fell apart, absolutely fell apart in every degree. And the criticisms that have come with him from that point is that he should have changed the game. He should have made it He should have made it so that we were, when it was clear after 10 minutes that Brighton were all over us, that he should have changed the midfield. And as is the Postecoglou way, he responded by saying substitutions are irrelevant. When this is happening to your team, there are bigger issues than whether or not we should make subs. Now, I get it. I admire his sort of stubbornness and his sternness and his willingness to not move, or his unwillingness to move from anything other than he believes is the right way. But a bit of game management could have helped us a lot there. We might miss out on Champions League places by 1 point, and it could have been saved by bringing Sarr and Basuma on and stealing up the midfield. But he just has his way, in the same way that Chelsea, that Chelsea game, when we went down to 9 men and we defended on the halfway line, he won't budge, and you can't deny him. He's got to where he's got because he's never been able to flinch or budge in the face of criticism. Just to go back to your question, none of this is new to him. None of it. He understands the criticism and he's heard it all before. And we'll see. I really hope that for our perspective, obviously from Tottenham fans' perspective, I hope it works. And I think it will work. But eventually, what happens is that his clubs previously have gone on to be such. They've become such a successful periods in the club's history that the narrative around him changes. And instead of him being called a naive and sort of out of his depth tactically, he ends up being eulogized as a beacon of the way a club should be managed.
Yeah, I really like him, to be honest with you. When he was at Celtic and there was a lot of talk over Moyes, Postecoglou was the guy that wanted the most to come to West Ham. And there's that rule of thumb, isn't it, that, there's a thin line, I think, between a manager having a philosophy and sticking to it, which is admirable, but then how far do you go before it becomes bad management, in the sense that you stick to it a little bit too much? And I think Postecoglou is possibly the best example of a manager in this regards, that he's got his way of playing and he'll do that no matter what. And he can be stubborn. I think there's no doubt about that. But in the last few years at Spurs, we've seen the likes of Conte, Mourinho, other managers that I would argue are also stubborn. But football perhaps wasn't as enjoyable. At least with Postecoglou, you've got enjoyment with it. But also, I think, when you said, come down the season, you miss out in the top 4 by 1 point, you might look at this game. But I'd suggest there's maybe games along the way that you will turn 1 point into 3 because of the way that Postecoglou plays as well. So while you will drop points, I think you'll also gain points at the same time as well because of the way that you play football. I'm a Postecoglou fan anyway, and I think he's possibly at the right club with Spurs too. What's your aims for the season, Flav? Overall, what are you hoping Tottenham achieve?
Just progression, really. I know that's sort of a soft answer and a wet answer, but what I've seen thus far is progression. What I've seen, like I mentioned at the top of the show, the statistics of it. You can see in the black and white that there are significant improvements made on last season, and generally that will play out in results on the football pitch. So I would say top 4 is got to be our aim, and a really good go at the Europa League, because silverware is what we've been craving. Silverware is what drives Ange Postecoglou. Although he said in these interview yesterday, press conference, that he doesn't want to. It's not about challenging for one trophy. It's about creating a football club that challenges for all of them consistently, and that's something that Spurs haven't been for a long, long time. So yes, a push towards the Europa League would be if we really give that a go, that would be massive. If we win it, huge for Spurs, right? You yourself know how massive it is in recent years to win the Conference League, which a lot of people look down their noses at. But I remember when you lot did it and being envious of what you were feeling. And sometimes you sort of have Sky Sports and mainstream broadcasters telling fans what they should and shouldn't be celebrating, and that's bullshit, right? So yeah, look, if we can, and you got close in Europa League as well, which would have been even more incredible. So if we can get that trophy, that monkey off our back, and win that trophy and have a go at finishing the top 4, that would be a really, really positive season. The problem is in the league, it's so strong. There's so many good teams at the top now. The top half of the side, top half of the table is insanely competitive, and that's even without Manchester United there. You'd imagine they're going to bounce back as well. And I know the start for West Ham hasn't been exactly how you'd want it to be, but you can't deny Lopetegui's an excellent manager, and you bought really well in the transfer window. So you'd imagine West Ham are going to cause problems, probably starting on Saturday, to be honest. But they'll probably cause problems this season. So what you can be an excellent team and not finish in the top four. So having this kind of it's top four or nothing attitude probably will lend you up to having a less enjoyable season than you want, because anyone in that top 8 could finish in the top 4.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. That one there, almost judging your season if you finish 4th or not, is quite critical, actually. Do you think you'll do either or, whether it be finishing in top 4 or winning a silverware? Do you think you'll manage to achieve?
Weirdly, I actually think we could win the Europa League. Winning the Europa League might be easier than finishing the top 4. Like, you look at the league, it's insane. Like, you got Villa are so good, Brighton are brilliant. Chelsea, they've been a bit of a surprise package, but the amount of investment in their squad. And then you've got 3 teams that are actually not leaving the top 4 at all, which are Man City, Arsenal, and Liverpool. And unless there's a complete collapse, which we're all here for, but it's unlikely to happen. It's so difficult. You've got one spot that Chelsea, Villa, Newcastle, Brighton, Tottenham, Fulham on form. If you look at Fulham's, I don't know how much value you place in XG and XG against, but Fulham should be second in the table if things had gone away. If they'd been burying the chances that they would, they'd be second in the table. They're much better than people think. And then obviously, like I say, Manchester United are coming back, and West Ham finding a bit of form. Like 2 unbeaten, aren't you? So won your last game. It's difficult, is what I'm saying. It's hard. So are we guaranteed to know? Should we be challenging for that top 4 spot at this stage? Absolutely. Can we win the Europa League? Yes. It's hard. You don't know how good some of these teams are until it plays out, because seasons aren't defined after 6 games, right? But if you look on paper, there's us. Second favourites are United. We absolutely battered United at Old Trafford. We are favourites for the competition. There's, you think Rangers getting into the final recently, and no disrespect to Rangers, but then, these are levels below. So at least semi-finals and finals. That would be a good season.
Yeah, I think you should be aiming to win it as well. And I quite agree. I think it's probably easier, use that lightly, to win the Europa League than it is to finish 4th. Because we had the same attitude when we were in the Conference League. It was like, well, it'll be easier for us to win the Conference League and get Europa League football that way than it is finishing in the top 6 of the Premier League.
Yeah.
And the hardest team we came up against was Fiorentina in the final, and that was it, And
where did you finish the league? The season where you won the Conference League, where did you finish in the league?
13th, but it doesn't really tell the story. We were in a relegation battle, and it's sort of at the end of the season we got a couple of wins, and
so it was a lot more sort of close. You was battling relegation.
We were in a relegation battle. Yeah, we were in a relegation battle. At the same time, we were going on to win the Conference League as well. Yeah, but I still think that maybe, I know it's a difficult one, because being in European football probably costs you points in the Premier League. I think it's a very fair thing to say that there is an impact there. But at the same time, when you're in a relegation battle, actually being able to go play a game on a Thursday and usually win it actually helps you out a little bit with your confidence and momentum and stuff. And then it gave us an advantage over some Premier League teams, I think, because the teams around us would lose on a Saturday, lose on a Saturday, lose on a Saturday. We'd lose on a Saturday, win on a Thursday, and going into next week, we had a little bit of something. And it was difficult to judge because you're going away, you've got an extra fixture, but it did give you that momentum that the other teams around you were lacking. So I did think it gave us a little bit of a benefit sometimes.
I agree with you, because last season was the first time we haven't had European football for a long, long time, and it was so apparent. If you lose a game, you got a week. We went out of the League Cup really early, second round, I think. We got beaten in January in the FA Cup by Manchester City. So we were literally playing a game every 7 days. And that generally, it's seen as like a positive, as an advantage. But what it's not really when you're trying to build momentum and get over results. Like we got beaten by Arsenal at White Hart Lane this season, and the mood was pretty low. But then we won 5 games on the bounce, and you're like, I know they were against lesser opposition. Not, if you take away Manchester United, and we really started flowing again. And the mood changed because victory breeds confidence and it breeds goodwill. So it's such a massive thing to have European football back, because you just left festering. And I was unaware of how important it was, because it's been so long that we haven't had European football, but just to fester after a bad result, especially if in my game, which is podcasting, in terms of people they don't want to listen to, which is I get it, I understand it, but they just don't. After getting battered, like we went, like the last result, a good example of how Tottenham improved is the last week we lost 3-2 to Brighton. First half, it was the best half of football.
Yeah, I thought you were fantastic in that half.
Yeah, which is herein lies the paradox of supporting Spurs currently, is that we can be fantastic and then we can be opened up. But last season, when we went to Brighton, they battered us 4-0. So if that's a demonstration of progress, it's an isolated example, but it could be used as an example of progress. Anyway, they battered us 4-0, and we had to just sit with it and fester in this negativity. It was hell last season. So I'm grateful of the Europa League, even if it obviously has its impact on league form. We got to use that to develop some of our young players that we spent a lot of money on. So it's a good thing that we have it.
Yeah, I think the positives far outweigh the negatives, regardless of the overall outcome, whether you win it or not. I think just being in it gives you, like I said, there's one real big negative, and that's the impact on fatigue and stuff like that. But especially when you're a Premier League club in the earlier stages, you can rotate usually and still be better than your opponents. Because I know you played Karabag and Ferencváros, is that how you pronounce it? We played them in pre-season, that team that you played.
Yeah.
So you're able to rotate the team, and you don't have to use. I mean, Chelsea, I know they're playing in the Conference League, but they haven't even bothered registering Cole Palmer for the group stages because they know they can just cruise through that league. They don't need Cole Palmer, and it's a bit like that. We were like that in the Conference League, and even the Europa League. A couple of seasons to come, I know it's changed now, but the last group stage game, we'd already won the group. We were able to play our kids in the last group. Like, what a privileged position to be in. That's match day 6 of a group stage of European football, and you're playing your academy players because you've already done the business. Everyone's got their feet up and stuff. So I think the positives are huge for a football club, and I'm missing European football this season massively for West Ham, for the excitement, and also, like you said, just the gap between games. I'm watching a lot of European football now. We're not in it. I'm jealous. I'm watching it. I want a bit of this. I want to watch Aston Villa watching them beat Bayern Munich. I want some of that. So I've really got a void in my life at the minute, Flav. Let's move on to my team then, West Ham. What do you make of us?
Well, look, the problem, as I know, right, I know full well, if you claim to win the transfer window, as I've done many times with Tottenham, it generally does go a little bit tits up at the beginning. It takes time for players to be embedded, and I think, and obviously you got a shift in leadership from David Moyes to Julen Lopetegui. So it's not a surprise that there has been some issues on the pitch, but generally, if I was a West Ham fan and the opportunity was what you have currently. The options were what you have currently, but with some real class players and a really strong first 11, and even like a decent squad as well. Then and having Lopetegui in charge as opposed to David Moyes, and I understand the reasons, and I'm not sure how you feel about David Moyes generally, but you can understand why it was right to kind of try something else, even if you have to really commend the work he'd done with West Ham and, like I say, delivering that European trophy. But you need to. It did feel like there needed to be a shift, and I think it is that what's happening at West Ham is what you've done to bring these players in and get this manager in is correct. You're moving in the right direction. But I mean, I'm curious to know what you think at the start of the season.
It's not been great, to be honest with you. I think the results are fair when you look at who we've beaten, who we've drawn against, and who we've got beaten by. On paper, it's not the end of the world. We've lost at home to Man City, Aston Villa, and Chelsea. I can shrug that off. good win
Draw
away
against
to
Fulham.
drawing
away.
against Fulham, beat Palace away. Good. They're good results. 4 points from those 2 games, I think, is a really good return. Beating Ipswich at home is what you expect, but we've done it. So the results are okay. I've not got an issue at all with the results. I think some of the games where we've won or drawn, it's the performances haven't been great per se. And I think my big reason for change from Moyes was to improve the style of playing, to be better on the pitch, be more entertaining. And that hasn't happened yet. But I'm okay. I'm still patient. I'm just calm. I'm just waiting to see what happens, really. I haven't got too downbeat when we've lost, but I've not got overly excited when we've won. It's very much, okay, I'm just going to remain in the middle and remain neutral with everything as much as I can and see what he produces long term, whether that's part of the bigger picture or what the performances look like in a few months' time. I do think the period we're away to enter now, Flav, is quite a good one for us to evaluate Lopetegui, because he's had 2 international breaks now to work on things. He doesn't have European football, so like we've discussed the advantages of European football, but there has to be some advantages of not having European football. And the biggest one has to be time on the training pitch, which is something Moyes didn't really have, actually, because he came in and we finished 6th in our first season, and since then we've had European football. So quite often you were playing Sunday, Thursday. You don't really have much time on the training ground with the players. Well, Lopetegui has that privilege this season, and I want to see a perk of not having European football, and it has to be what he's doing on the training pitch. So this run we're away to play, yourselves away, Man U at home, Nottingham Forest away, Everton at home. That's 4 good fixtures, I think, to get your teeth into and say, right, what you're going to come up with. You can get 7 points. That's shaping up good for the rest of the season. 6 is all right. Less than 6 is probably pretty disappointing. And anything more than 7, and I might start to get a little bit excited, truth be told. But it's been a mixed bag of results for me so far, not in regards to the actual results, but just in terms of Lopetegui thus far. I want to see more. I want to see more concrete proof that he's the right man for the job.
But you might not see that for a long while, right? Because you've looking at your fixtures, you've lost the ones you might expect to lose,
Yeah,
and you've beaten the teams you would expect to win. And like you said, draw away at Fulham that's a good result.
yeah, it's a good result. Yeah.
So it may be that, and those fixtures you mentioned there, there are some challenging ones there. And I know West Ham historically do very well at Spurs, certainly in recent histories anyway. So it could well be that you get 3 points. I don't know what I'd do if that happens, to be honest, mate. It's hard enough doing a podcast when we
start looking forward to AZ Alkmaar, I think.
I don't want that. we need really, really, really important that we beat West Ham, because there's too many times you've come to White Lane and took the piss. So we've got to play our brand of football, but also ensure that we don't see the failings that we saw against Brighton. But like I say, is for some reason there is just this issue every time West Ham turn up that. And it's what you want, right? From a London derby, it's exactly what you want. The energy that West Ham bring, and the how badly the fans want it, and for good reason, right? I understand it. And there isn't a bunch of fans that enjoy winning at Tottenham more than West Ham. Even I include Arsenal in that as well. So that energy is always difficult to deal with, and I think like the best way to beat Spurs will be just hitting on the break. How have you been setting up?
A little bit, to be disjointed, I think.
Really?
To be fair, I think I'm still trying to evaluate Lopetegui's identity is, to be honest with you. When we hired him, I felt he was a bit more, pragmatic than Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp. I think he was a little bit more like David Moyes, essentially. And it's some games you can sort of see what he's trying to do, and other games not so much. And there hasn't been a complete performance yet, if that makes sense. Even the games we've won will come away where it's sort of like there's a weakness there that just wasn't really capitalized on, perhaps, and we got away with it to some extent. And we've had sort of players out of form, and I don't think he knows his best 11 yet either. I think he now knows his best defense. But in terms of the midfield, I think he's still trying to work that out. And
is it? Sorry to cut you. Is his best defense? Is it Bissaka, Todibo, Kilman, and
I think so. They were really good against Ipswich. I know it was only Ipswich and all that, but Liam Delap's a fantastic striker in a really good form. And Todibo had him quiet. He scored, but that was nothing to do with Todibo. That was off the back of a set piece. But Todibo kept him really quiet for pretty much 90 minutes, which isn't an easy thing to do. But that defence looked good against Ipswich. And that's an Ipswich team that I've seen cause Aston Villa problems.
Yeah.
They've caused Liverpool a bit of grief on the opening day for an hour until Liverpool just stepped up a little bit. So, yeah, that'll be the back four on Saturday. And it looks like a good back four in terms of just individual players and stuff. So if he can get his midfield sorted, then we'll maybe be on to something. So he's got all the components. He just needs to work it out.
Yeah. I just, like I say, and you bought good players. And look, I just think you look at your first 11, Paqueto's just sensational midfield. I know that there hasn't been a great deal of consistent form across your first 11, but and some of the sort of better players, you'd say, were the defensive ones. I know Souček's he plays in midfield, but he's been quite impressive this season, even in defeat. So, and I rate him a lot. I just like his energy. So I think it's going to be a great game. I really do think it's going to be for a neutral. Any game involving Spurs typically is entertaining at least. But I think with the fact that it's an early kickoff on a Saturday, let's hope that it does. With all due respect, I hope that your weekend's ruined and mine isn't. But it's going to be a bit of a ding dong, I think.
Well, last question then. How do you see Saturday going?
All right, so I'm going to say 3-1 Spurs, but
right, okay.
But I don't know. Anything could happen.
Yeah, I get you. It's a difficult one. I've said 3-2 West Ham. We're both expecting goals. I think this could be a bit of a basketball game. You have a pop, we have a pop kind of thing. And it could be interesting. But listen, Flav, thank you so much for joining me. Massively appreciate it.
Pleasure.
If you guys would like to see and hear more from Flav, all the social media links to the podcast and his own social media as well as in the description below, so get them checked out. If you enjoyed this video at home, please do drop a like on it by clicking thumbs up. Subscribe to Hammers Chat, myself and Flav. Catch you in a bit.